Good morning. Good morning. Videos have been starting earlier and earlier. Like, I think the camera is not on or we're not rolling. Sometimes I'll be in my pre-video state, getting ready for you all. Good morning. How are we? I gave you a lot of information last night and was actually up very late. So waking up this morning, I was like, should I come on here and do the next part of 2nd Chronicles? Might as well. The motivation does come to me in mysterious ways to get up and do this. I didn't even really drink a sip of my coffee. I'm very tired. Nonetheless, enough rambling. Let me get into the 2nd Chronicles part 8. We are going to be discussing 2 kings as usual. Just getting into the rhythm. The more that we cover these kings, the more that we understand the journey of Judah and Israel, the better we can understand ourselves and the nature of where we're at today. So they struggled with things just as we struggle with things, even though it seems a little different and a little foreign and a little way back when. Their message is still important, and it is in the book and retold for a reason. So let's go ahead and start out with our quote here. We have Auden again. A poet's hope to be like some valley cheese, local but prized elsewhere. This is 7, Roman numeral 7, 1858, 1971, shorts 2 by Auden. Poet's hope to be like some valley cheese, local but prized elsewhere. Okay, so what does this mean? Like everything, I mean, we've kind of been taking the subject of a quote and kind of putting it into what we're talking about, the kings. What if we put it into the quote here? So if we say something like a king's hope is to be local but prized elsewhere, and gives us a little bit of a different perspective. So we have these kings, wanting to be for their people, right? Wanting to be local and close to their people. But they also want to be revered and exalted and talked about other places too. They did not just want their power and reach to stay with them, right? They wanted to be known other places. And where does this come? This comes from David specifically, King David and Solomon, I would say. They were started out very, very strong in their kingship very early on, which was something different. It was something different for Israel, obviously, because it's some of their first kings. But it was a little bit of ego that had overtaken them, and oftentimes that proved their downfall. They had just a little bit of pride and a little bit of ego that was associated with wanting to be known and wanting to be talked about anywhere but their own town and their own kingdom. Because that's kind of a given, right? It's given to them, they take it for granted, and they want to use that to go ahead and spread out to other places, to be talked about and to be revered in every other place maybe but their own. Sometimes that happens. But King David was like that, okay, very much talked about everywhere else. King Solomon as well, due to his wealth and his wisdom, message has spread about him. So these kings, it's quite literally in their blood to also want that fame, and who also want to be talked about and remembered for great things. But it causes a little bit of issues, as we know, right? People are people and they make mistakes. So let's go ahead and begin with 25 verse 1. It says, Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Joehoaddan, and she was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not wholeheartedly. He also hired 1,000 fighting men from Israel, for 100 talents of silver. Okay. But a man of God came to him and said, Your Majesty, these troops from Israel must not march with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, not with any of the people of Ephraim. So Amaziah dismissed the troops who had come to him from Ephraim and sent them home. They were furious with Judah and left home in a great rage. Amaziah then marshaled his strength and led his army to the valley of Salt, where he killed 10,000 men of Seir. Make sure that's right, okay. And when Amaziah returned from slaughtering the Edomites, he brought back the gods of the people of Seir. He set them up as his own gods, bowed down to them, and burned sacrifices to them. The anger of the Lord burned against Amaziah, and he sent a prophet to him, who said, Why do you consult this people's gods, which could not save their own people from your hand? So this is a bit strange, right? You know, he's with the Lord, apparently not wholeheartedly, as we can see that there are some curiosities that are striking Amaziah. He builds up this pride, this sense of pride, this sense of ego from going ahead and leading these raids on Edom and the Edomites in Seir. And then he takes their gods and actually earnestly begins to pray to them. And he begins to burn sacrifices to them. So this had me confused when I read it. You know, why would he do this? You know, what was the motive? I always want to know why. And nothing really came to me. But I guess we could just associate this with our theme of pride and ego. You know, he wanted, greater of what he had. He wanted greater. He wanted more knowledge. He wanted more revelation, possibly. He wanted more insight. And he thought that he could access this through the other gods. He wanted something different. So very, very interesting, that part, I thought. And of course, the Lord, that angers him. If we learned anything through these chapters of Kings and Chronicles, it's that lesson there, okay? That is what we are not to do. It's like the worst thing that you could do. But, it happened, all right? It wasn't, what am I trying to say? It wasn't just a localized problem. It wasn't something that happened like once or twice. A lot of people did this in Israel, right? But also outside of Israel. That's how those customs came into play. So, anyways, why do you consult this people's gods, which could not save their own people from your hand? And this line to me sounds much like something God would say, okay? Like a little bit of spicy, but also earnestly asking and just wanting the right answer. And it says here, while he was still speaking, the king said to him, Have we appointed you an advisor to the king? Stop, why be struck down? So the prophet stopped, but said, I know God has determined to destroy you, because you have done this, and you have not listened to his counsel. Okay, so again, we have this prophet here, and you see how I mentioned before that prophets are usually appointed to advise the king. They're appointed and retained by kings, and this prophet was not, obviously, so the king is dismissing him on that accord, and of course because he's saying something that Amaziah did not want to hear. Again, just it seems like it would be out of character for Amaziah, because he's been faithful and going to the Lord and consulting with the Lord all these times before, and now we are a little bit confused. So yes, we're going to go ahead and go on here. So the prophet, at least he wasn't killed or anything, but he said his last 2 cents. God has determined to destroy you because of this. After Amaziah, king of Judah, consulted his advisors, he sent to challenge Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel. Come, let us face each other in battle. So Amaziah brushes off this consultation with the prophet, and he's still ego-driven. He still has this fuel and this bloodlust to go ahead and dominate. So he's actually asking Israel into battle. And mind you, they've been pretty peaceful these last few cycles of kings, okay? They had the marriage covenants involved, so they haven't been fighting as we see them fight. But now he wants to spark something back up. He wants to prove something. He wants to be not only known in Judah as a great conqueror or in Ephraim as a great conqueror, but also Israel. And we can see here Jehoash knows this, and he says, "You say to yourself that you have defeated Ephraim, and now you are arrogant and proud. But stay at home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall and that of Judah also?" So he has some sense. Jehoash, king of Israel, has some sense. And as soon as I read this line, arrogant and proud, I've committed to that theme. And I did think of the theme before, but then he literally says this line. I'm like, oh, yep, that's what this is. Okay. And again, it could also be why he consulted with the gods, right? The arrogance, the pride, and there was something else that I was touching on, feeling like he doesn't have restrictions and doesn't have rules. He can just go about and do what he does, and, nothing bad will come of it, okay? But if we learned anything, that would be the one thing. Okay, so here we go. Cause your own downfall and that of Judah also. From that time, Amaziah turned away from following the Lord, and they conspired against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. Okay, so being part of Judah, and being part of a kingdom that does look to the Lord. The kingdom looked to the Lord because the king looked to the Lord. And so when he turned away, they have their consorts and they have their court. People will rebel, really. People will rebel and they go after you in that sense. So he's done. Okay, that is Amaziah. Are the details not written in the book of Annals? Okay, let's go on. Then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as Amaziah had done. God helped him against the Philistines and against the Arabs who lived in Gerbal, and against the Meunites. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord, his God, and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Uzziah was another one who was faithful to the Lord, but his pride overtook him. He thought that he can go ahead and burn incense when he was not authorized. And right, the authorization that somebody has to go ahead and burn incense, especially in front of the temple of the Lord. You have to be from the Levite tribe, and you have to be a descendant of Aaron nonetheless. Most Levites were descendants of Aaron and Moses, but you really do have to be a descendant of Aaron, not just to burn incense, right? This was to do the burnt offerings, this was to do the preaching and the servicing, just anything to do with the house of God, the temple of God. You have to be a descendant of Aaron. So the priests go in there and they say something to him. They say just what I told you just now. And Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand ready to burn incense, became angry while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, no less. Leprosy broke out on his forehead, so they hurried him out. Indeed, he himself was eager to leave, because the Lord had afflicted him. Okay, and I apologize. I thought I had put an extra line in here. I think I forgot to copy it. But he was quite literally afflicted and punished right then and there. Not so much due to the action, right? It could have been corrected depending on the way Uzziah reacted. So he definitely could have, had a conversation. He could have repented right then and there, but instead he got angry. He got angry about it. So the Lord had afflicted him. And Uzziah, I thought I had added more, but I guess we're just going to leave it at that. Let me just see something real quick. I apologize. I know what happens. I just don't know if I should put what happens in there or if it's just extra information. But essentially, he rules for quite a bit longer. But he was sick, and his son was ruling in his place while he was sick, and eventually he died of the leprosy. And leprosy is one of those strange diseases where I don't, it's obviously a physical, right? You can see it physically, but the sickness and stuff, that's just something I am not familiar with, and I wish to never be familiar with. Good thing, because it is long gone, but it's one of those strange diseases that came about in times of old. You see this kitty tail here. 26. Okay, yeah, there are no more lines in this chapter that I can quote here, but it says, Uzziah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in a cemetery that belonged to the kings, for the people said he had leprosy. And Jotham his son succeeded him as king. So you can guess who we're going to talk about tomorrow. We will talk about Jotham, and we will talk about Ahaz, and we might get into Hezekiah, depending on how I'm feeling. But that is it. Those are the two kings. Both of these had issues with pride. This quote that we read is about pride. It's about pride, a little bit of fame, wanting to be proud. Something to... You can be proud. You can be proud. You just cannot harbor pride. That's where the things get a little bit of tricky, and that's where you can tend to slip up. How to be proud but not harbor pride is that you have to also allow yourself to hold pride and be proud of other people, to be happy for other people, to celebrate other people's wins. That is how you release your own pride that you may have been harboring about yourself, because it's natural. We all feel feelings of pride. It's very, very common. So to release that from yourself and not to harbor it and let it build up and up and up and up to lead to an unfortunate downfall. You have to become proud and happy of someone else or an event. In that way, it gets dispersed and it releases elsewhere. Okay, and it releases from you, and then you can build up a happy pride again, only to release it again. So it's okay to feel it for a fleeting moment, but you don't want to let it get too built up into a mountain that overtakes you on the inside. It is one of those powerful emotions and feelings. So I will leave you with this, and I appreciate you guys listening to my long rant yesterday and sticking with me here today. God bless you. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.